Hello everybody, and welcome back to mbavtober, where I attempt to upload a video for every week of the month of October about My Babysitter's a Vampire, and today we're talking about Rory, because it's Rory Week! For those who don't know, on Tumblr, Rory Week is an event where for 7 days out of the month of October, we celebrate all things Rory. And so I had to get the Rory video out during Rory Week, obviously. This year for mbavtober, we are making an individual video about each main character of the Fan Gang, which is like the title that we give to the main core 5 characters of the series. Can I just say, I'm sorry about how this video looks. I'm currently visiting my father. I went to go see Twilight live. It was very interesting, very fascinating. It was a great time. And so I went with my dad, and so now I'm hanging out with him, but I need to get this video out. So I've just kind of scraped together whatever he had lying around his house. These are supposed to be ghosts. You can't even see. It looks horrible on camera now that I'm looking at it. And I'm just using like a random light as my main lighting. This looks suspiciously very like 2013, 2014 vlogger. Probably because this is shot the exact same way all of those videos were. I'm sitting on my bedroom floor with a desk lamp and some fancy lighting in the background. So yes, today for the character of Rory, I want to discuss the concept of existentialism and vampires, because this is a very, very rich topic that I think plenty of people have discussed and sort of unpacked, but not in the specific way with characters like Rory, who I would argue live a very authentic and pure existence. Rory is an extremely happy character, and as a full-fledged vampire, that seems to bristle against that understanding of existence, right? It was actually quite hard to do research on this because my original thought was I want to make a video about happy vampires and the existence of the sunshine vampire in pop culture. And that became increasingly difficult to research because apparently no one finds this very interesting except me. I think the concept of characters who are vampires and yet live happy, authentic existences is very fascinating, and I want to partially dig into why I think it's like not a commonly researched thing, or at least maybe I wasn't looking up the right search terms, as well as get into the concept of existentialism, because the crumbs that I was searching for when looking up, you know, sunshine vampires led me down the path of existentialism. So even though I am not a philosopher and I very, very rarely engage with philosophy in my fields of research, I thought it would be interesting to kind of dip my toe into it with Rory. So yeah, keep watching if you're interested. Is post-existentialism the existence of the new vampire? I guess we'll try and answer that question. You guys like my mug, by the way? It's a mug with a mug on it. Look at that. I like it on this side more because the handle's on the wrong side and that just looks so funny to me. I specifically used this mug when I did my Max Russo video because I feel like these two characters are very similar in a sense. I even mentioned that in the Max Russo video. It's one of the first things I said was that Rory's my favorite character, so obviously Max Russo is my favorite character. One last thing before we really get into the video, okay? Look at these cool bracelets that I have. I make them and I sell them on my Shopify store. This is specifically the Rory bracelet, and I have a bracelet for each character of the Fan Gang. And you can get one with their name or without their name if you don't want people to know that you specifically rep mbav bracelets or whatever. They're all at my store, which is comicbookddr.shopify.com. So I will have the products linked in the description. You can, you know, go to my store and shop all the mbav stuff. And one very important thing about Rory Week is that for the entirety of Rory Week, so from October 9th to October 15th, everything in the store will be 25% off to celebrate all things Rory Week. So yes, make sure to grab your stuff, pick up all the items that you've been wanting. I have some bundles on there if you want to get a bunch of mbav related merchandise. mbav famously never made really any merch, so you can't even find anything like secondhand. So this is your way to get your fill of My Babysitter's a Vampire merchandise. And also I may be coming out with some other things like stickers in the future, and you might be getting some fun little freebie stickers in the meantime. So yes, please check it out and buy something. I hand make everything and it's a great way to support the channel if you're interested in throwing a couple bucks my way. Nothing is too expensive over there in my opinion. So with that, on to the video. Okay, so first off, yeah, why is the happy vampire not really something a lot of scholars have dug into? Again, I could just be shit at research. That's a very strong possibility, okay? But after looking through so many different journal articles and published books about vampires, very little of them talk about the archetype of the vampire who is happy. And maybe that's because when it comes to real media, it isn't that common of a thing. Specifically, I mean, a lot of the more famous vampire works of fiction always have the vampire being existential and living in existential dread, essentially. The only medium where I can think of happy or positive vampires is children's media. Right now, actually, Disney Channel is actually taking a swing at the concept of vampires again. My Babysitter's Vampire is not a Disney Channel show, as we know. It was not made in-house by Disney Channel. It was made by Teletoon, which is a Canadian animation network, and it was then just brought over to America and aired on Disney Channel. So this is technically the first time Disney Channel has ever actually attempted to make a vampire series, but it's also technically like the second time, if that makes sense. It's called Vampirina, and the main character's name is V, and she seems like a very happy, optimistic, bubbly, standard Disney Channel main character girl. Also, she goes to performing arts school and she sings because of course she does. And it is actually, weirdly enough, an adaptation of a Disney Junior cartoon, which I'm assuming has the same plot. I don't know, I've never seen it before. So this is the kind of realm where the happy vampire exists in, right? A children's show essentially has to have sanded down all of the harsher edges of the vampire, which virtually renders it completely separated from what the vampire actually has always existed as. So to a large degree, I can understand why people would say that, like, vampires aren't supposed to be happy. That's not the point of their existence as an archetype. To make the vampire happy is to sully its existence as an archetype, which reflects our inherently doomed existence or whatever. I think that's wrong. I think it's uninteresting and boring to say that one specific archetype or character has to exist in one specific way. And Rory is a great example of this because he's so fascinating and so interesting as a character, in my opinion. Even if you're just watching as a basic everyday person, it's bizarre to watch him just like move through life throughout the series. An example of this is that one day during like a family party after it had been going for way too long, I was in the living room with a lot of my little baby cousins and I decided to put on this show because I have a problem, and also because I figured it was a nice, fine, lighthearted show to put on for some tweens and children, right? But eventually they all went to sleep and my uncle was then deciding to lay down on the couch and kind of rest for a bit after putting his kids to sleep. And he ended up watching the show with me and he was like, what is this guy's deal when it came to Rory? He was like, is he trying to screw them over? Is he trying to be their friend? Like, what is happening here? So he's a very interesting, intriguing character within the series. So even if you find the concept of the cheerful vampire to be boring, Rory is interesting, which I would say, you know, bristles against and is conflicting that initial opinion that people have. I would argue that series like What We Do in the Shadows is a conflicting message towards that, which I'm not going to be talking about in this video because I didn't watch it. I'm sorry, I'm a bad YouTuber, guys. But I do think a lot of people who write about vampires and write vampire characters in their series don't necessarily see the vampire as being happy as interesting, and that's completely fair. Everyone's allowed to use the vampire in whatever way they see fit. But let's get into some of the proof, I guess I could say, about Rory living a pure existence as a vampire and being happy. The only time Rory ever really has problems with his vampirism specifically relates to it inhibiting his ability to have fun, which really only happens like once throughout the entire series. Specifically, Pranksy comes to mind. He decides one day to start a prank channel where he uses his vampire speed and inability to show up on camera to paint people's faces really fastly, which is an extremely 2011 understanding of internet virality. And he ends up getting like millions of views on his YouTube, I guess, channel, right? And the problem with this is that he wants to boast and show off how cool this achievement is, but no one believes him that he's Pranksy, because Pranksy's never revealed himself. And Rory specifically can't reveal himself because he doesn't show up on camera. Because the lore with these vampires, I've gone over in previous videos, many a video I've talked about the lore. In this lore, they don't show up on camera. The evil demonic presence of the vampire blocks their souls, which in this universe mirrors are like a reflection of the human soul. And so because the vampire dark energy is blocking their souls, they don't show up in a mirror or on camera. That's how the show explains it, okay? They don't explain it in depth. They just kind of one-off, you know, offhandedly mention it in random scenes, right? Also, I would argue this would bring a lot of problems into question if Rory were to ever try to become a modern day public figure, because it would be revealed that he's a vampire so quick. Like, someone's gonna try and take a stealthy video of him and then all hell breaks loose. Although whether the concept of vampires even being a secret in this universe is its own thing. Like, it seems like after Jesse kind of royally screwed up his whole vampire coven council situation thing, vampires are like an open secret in Whitechapel. We never really see Rory be concerned or upset with his existence as a vampire. He never seems to question it or be upset with it. There's only very quick, instantaneous moments of displeasure that are quickly, you know, rushed away once the small problem is solved.
You're already a soulless, undead creature of the night. How much worse can you get?
Dude, if my mom knew I was a vampire, I'd be grounded for like a month.
He has a rat in a bag that he is going to eat for lunch. I love the fact that he's like packing his lunch, and that means putting a live rat in a brown paper bag. Hilarious. And Erica swats it away, so he has to run down the hallway chasing the rat again. Like, that's about as much struggle we get with Rory and being a vampire. And this is weird, right? Because the boy is like 14, 15 years old. One could just say that like the sadness and dread of immortal existence just like hasn't caught up to him yet. He famously isn't the brightest character out of them all, so people could just like chalk this up to his stupidity. But I don't want to stop there, okay? I think that there's some different layers here that we can expound upon, aka I'm about to take some crack. I'm about to hit the crack pipe and just start going off the rails and talking about existentialism, okay? Let me philosophize. Is that even a word? Philosophize? Let me do philosophy. So, existentialism. It's kind of hard for vampires in general, I would say. What is existentialism? I don't know. I'm not John Green. This isn't Crash Course. I'm not here to give you a history lesson. Generally, it's the idea that humans are not born with any hardwired purpose, and that it is up to humans individually to create their own essence and existence and morality, etc., meaning in life. It was not up to the being that created us beings to imbue meaning into our lives. It's up to ourselves, right? Now, this is hard for vampires because they live inherently selfish and demanding lifestyles that bristles against the society that they're supposed to live in, which is our human everyday society. I found one really good article about existentialism and vampires, specifically relating to Interview with a Vampire, written by Anne Rice. Pardon me, but I've never actually read Interview with a Vampire. I'm sorry, I'm working on it, okay? Right now I'm currently reading American Psycho, and it's a lot. So I haven't gotten around to actually reading Interview with a Vampire, but I've seen the movie multiple times, and fans of the novel can roast me all they want, but I would argue that they're decently comparable in adaptation-wise. This article that I found from the early 90s helps kind of fill in the cracks a little bit from, you know, not reading the book. It is called Post-Existentialism in the Neo-Gothic Mode, Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire by Barbara Frey Waxman. This article supposes that Interview with the Vampire addresses a lot of the real-life issues that people face in a postmodern world. and that the characters are distinctly neo-Gothic and represent themes of the post-existentialist perspective of their main characters, specifically Louis. This article really helped me understand existentialism a little bit more when it comes to the vampire specifically, and also made me draw a lot of parallels, specifically to characters like Sarah to that of Louis, and Erica to that of Lestat. Again, the character of Rory doesn't really exist in a lot of these stories, so comparing how Rory reacts to his vampirism compared to characters like Sarah and Erica, you can kind of draw the parallels between Interview the Vampire with Louis and Lestat, and then kind of understand how Rory exists within this existentialist framework. Now, post-existentialism is a term and phrase that I'm not quite sure is something that like really exists. I don't know. Post-existentialism as a title, as a phrase, is what existentialism has evolved into post-World War II specifically because of the horrors of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, kind of, reshaping people's understanding and kind of re-emerging existentialism in the popular culture, right? Other people don't call this like post-existentialism, they just call it like how existentialism has evolved and still call it existentialism. So I don't know. I'm gonna probably be using both terms interchangeably. If I'm wrong about any of this, please call me out in the comments below, okay? So Waxman discusses how the vampire is no longer like anthropomorphized evil, but is now a sort of like sad, depressed figure that waxes philosophically about the world and is a reflection of the evil damnation of our society. If I'm looking over here a lot, it's because those are where my notes are. Okay, so existentialism can be a very scary topic for a lot of people because it essentially is an inherently nihilistic point of view, which is to say that there is no meaning, there is no inherent understood ideology and thing that exists, that whatever being created us didn't create any meaning, and that we all are absurdly just here floating and nothing means anything, right? Lighthearted material to talk about in the YouTube video. Quote Waxman, "What pulls the individual back from the edge of suicidal despair, the freedom of choice, and the ethic of responsibility. These empower one to choose actions, to shape a meaningful moral life, to judge oneself, and to take responsibility for the consequences of one's actions." Post-existentialism recognizes that there are internal and external constraints on the individual's ability to build a good life. The vampire Louis is like that still hopeful existentialist who must confront the compelling post-existentialist outlook, which fears that freedom itself may be a chimera. One final quote from a few more pages down. Rice's post-existentialist addendum is to emphasize the naivete of the existentialist assumption that one could obtain supreme comprehension and shape his/her own fate. This is essentially the kind of existence that Sarah lives in, that she has to create meaning and purpose in her own life, and she can't because what she understands to be the meaning and purpose that she's supposed to live by is 100% conflicting with the actual existence that she lives as a vampire, which, means immortality and drinking human blood. Louis, to a certain degree, is a lot of the same. So here's the thing about nihilism. Nihilism is easy for the vampire because what kind of meaningful world would allow for them to be gifted with immortality, right? Gifted with it, with, the conflict being that they must commit manslaughter against their fellow humans and have meaning be thrown to the wind, by senseless murder consistently, just for your own existence to continue on. I mean, to a certain degree, egotism is what fuels all vampires, especially according to Louis in Interview with the Vampire, as he observes Lestat's behavior.
She's not dead. You're in love with your mortal nature. It was just the one thing that could bring you peace. You peace. We're predators. Those all-seeing eyes were meant to give them detachment. The girl is that. They take her, Louis, and that hunger. No.
I'm just trying to do something. Something so I can feel, normal. You don't fit in with humans anymore, Sarah. Why keep fighting it? Come over to the hot side. Everybody looks better with bangs. Put those away.
He rejects this notion from Lestat and sees it as a cardinal sin on his part to fall into this, such ego. So how could there be any meaning in a world which allows the vampire to exist? But there's the rub. There is no meaning. You're supposed to make it for yourself. So how characters like Sarah and Erica and Louis and Lestat live is probably how Rory should or could exist at one point in a different story or a different narrative or whatever. Rory doesn't have any of this problem. I would argue that he has fully already embraced the absurd and has already decided to start making authentic choices. It's understood that meaning is only derived from somebody who decides to give it to themselves. He is extremely unbothered with his abundance of freedom. This is another thing that a lot of existentialists bristle with, which is that humans, if there is no meaning made for us, then we have too much choice when it comes to what we should decide is meaningful in our lives. Right? I think Rory doesn't care about this at the end of the day. I mean, this is reflected in the fact that he does not consume human blood. He exclusively hunts animals. Past the movie, the only time he ever engages with human blood is from donated blood, which in the context of the show was going to go to other vampires anyways. Pretty much all vampire shows have to kind of decide what their stance is on donated blood and blood bags, because a lot of them will say that it's wrong because humans donate blood to save other human lives, not to feed vampires, right? Because the vampire is unknown to the world, any donated human blood that is going to vampires is essentially taking it from a human being who would probably use that blood to live. That is the no blood bag stance that some places hold. The pro blood bag stance, which mbav has, is rather it be a blood bag than a body bag, right? Would you rather Rory be killing a bunch of people or take a blood bag or two from the blood truck? Also, I'd argue it somewhat excuses Erica's behavior because we see that she steals a bunch of blood from the blood bag. And again, because this is all in the context of the blood drive episode, where we specifically find out that the nurses that are there collecting the donated blood are vampire nurses. So it is to be assumed that they are like selling this blood to other vampires, or maybe they're just gonna live off of it for themselves. I don't know. It's never explained where the blood goes. It's just that it's definitely for consumption and not for saving people's lives. So it's like, if this was always the intended use of the blood bags, might as well go to our main characters. You still confront the problematic element of the people who were donating this blood didn't know that's what it was going to, but this ain't true blood, okay? We're not here to ponder on that, I guess, you know? So to acknowledge that one's ethics are related to the givens of one's situation, that is how the vampire is able to reach a meaningful existence, right? Because again, the context of the vampire situation is inherently contradicting to what us normal humans have decided is a meaningful existence. The factors that you need to survive influence the way you create meaning. Rory has come to terms with already, I guess, right? Or maybe he hasn't even questioned it yet. But I would argue he has. His choice to abstain from live human blood and to only drink animal blood and hunt animals is him deciding what his own parameters for morality are. And he comes to this conclusion very succinctly and very quickly. It's in a small little scene in the movie, basically.
I'll quit, I swear. Do you think they make a patch for vampires? Gotcha.
He's already accepted that morally he does not want to kill humans to drink their blood and would much rather drink animal blood. And for those of you who are uncomfortable with the fact that Rory consistently hunts animals, yeah, I think that's the point. The vampire will and always has been a reflection of our moral qualms as humans. So when you see Rory killing a cat and mummifying it, it's so unhinged that he does that in an episode. I love that they go to the museum to visit a mummy and Rory's like, can I do that? And they're like, no, don't do that. And he's like, okay, I did that with multiple creatures. I've mummified multiple creatures. I think that that is a pointed reflection of how humans consume animal meat, right? And we have morally justified that. And that's why so many people are vegan, because they're like, I've decided that my own parameters for morality does not include killing animals. But again, vampiric existence has to live on its own moral chain because they're not human. And the fact that they are trying to force themselves to be human and follow the same morals as humans is what causes the sadness to happen. And I would argue that's the big situation for Sarah, at least. But this isn't a video about Sarah, so, you know, that's a thread to explore another day. So that is why I say specifically that Rory lives an authentic life, because the only authentic moral choices that one can make is if they choose to make them themselves and attempt for the most part, to not let the outside world influence them. And yeah, he has to do these things for himself because none of the bozos around him are going to, that's for sure. One of the main things that Rory has conflict in his life with is the fact that his friends are kind of mean to him, and the fact that he remains optimistic despite all of that is a huge feat, honestly. You couldn't see me doing that, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the fun starts now.
Rory, now's not the best time.
Wait, you're not gonna invite me in?
Sorry, the fun can start later.
Aw, come on!
For a lot of the show, it feels like for the other characters that they're basically stuck with Rory because he's a vampire. Specifically, Ethan and Benny never really seemed to want to be friends with him early on in the movie. And when he's turned into a vampire, they're kind of forced to like keep him in the fold of the friend group. In the same way that like Erica doesn't really want to be friends with any of the rest of them, but maybe Sarah. And the only reason why she hangs out with them is because she's a vampire. So she's inherently kind of like in the fold with the rest of them, right? But again, discussion for another day. All of this possible angst or anger that he may feel towards the people around him who actively reject him because he's annoying or cringe or whatever, which is silly, is quelmed pretty quickly because he's inherently self-satisfied. He doesn't need other people's validation to be happy.
I'm laid back, dude. Why stress?
If I may go on a completely unrelated rant and tangent, I think this whole thing of like, I hate this person just because they're annoying or just because they're cringe is an extremely annoying and exhausting existence to live, because how are you ever gonna be in a community with somebody? Everyone's always so isolated these days, and they're like, oh, I wish I had the friend group from Friends or whatever the fuck, or like, you know, the Fang Gang, like, oh, I wish I had a friend group like this in real life, when it's like, you can't even deal with somebody for meowing once as a vocal stim or whatever. How are you expecting to build community if you can't handle someone being just a little bit annoying or a little bit cringe? Is that really a crime? It really isn't. It genuinely isn't. The only reason why this friend group even is a friend group, at least by the start of season 2, is because they've accepted each other's eccentricities and extra quirks and have decided that their connection as a group matters more than these little things that might annoy you for like half a second and then you move on with your life.
If there's a fight coming, I want to be here with my friends.
I'm not going to leave Sarah if that guy wants to wipe us out.
There's a reason why I talk about the specific pieces of media that I do. That's because anyone who would find a video that long about that piece of media, specifically cringe, is not going to engage in it, and I'm not going to get weird comments about it. Like, it's all intentional, y'all. All of this. It's on purpose, okay? But yes, this understanding of existentialism removes itself from the individualistic sort of mentality that it runs within, and frames it more within the community and within the society that you specifically live in, right? Within the world of vampires, Rory has found himself a proper way of existence, a proper meaning to his life. And he's chill because of that. I think what mainly made me realize this was the season 1 finale when Sarah officially becomes a vampire. I mean, just seeing how the three of these people interact and understand a vampiric existence is proof of this to me. In my opinion, if you're not at a place of acceptance with vampirism specifically, it might take you a while to reach an equilibrium of, you know, meaningful existence.
Welcome to Team V, Sarah. It might not be awesome at first, but after a few decades or so, it'll be...
Welcome to the rest of your life, girlfriend. When you're ready, we will be there for you.
Not for Rory, though. If you want to make killing humans a morally okay behavior on your part, go ahead. That's essentially what Lestat and by extension Erica end up doing.
You'll get used to killing. Just forget about that mortal coil. You'll become accustomed to things all too quickly.
It just means that you're not going to be accepted by human society. But like Erica and also Lestat, again, have no reason to want to be accepted by human society. They have no reason to, and they aren't. by all means and metrics. And it's Erica constantly pushing what her morals and meaning of life onto Sarah is what causes so much conflict between Sarah specifically, because she wants to live by the moral judgment of humans. And Erica says that's bullshit. And Rory can't be a help in this situation because he's already moved on to being an authentic existence. And I don't think he has the means to explain that necessarily, so there you go. More on the other vampire characters later. Specifically next week, we'll talk about Erica. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This kind of feels like a shot in the dark to me. I don't know if anyone's gonna really want this video or understand it, or if I really came across really well. I'm feeling a lot more insecure about this video than I was about the Benny video. You guys can let me know if you like it, if this made any sense at all. I don't know. For the longest time while I was theorizing making these videos, I was like dead set on talking about the archetype of the sunshine vampire and giving examples and talking about what makes the sunshine vampire and all those things. And I repeatedly found myself just hitting dead ends and not really being able to get a script going that made sense. And so that's when I decided to pivot into philosophy, which is a very nebulous, you know, kind of spooky realm for me. So yeah, please, you know, give me some grace, I guess. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and I'll see you next week. I'm gonna try my best. Bye-bye.